Jaishankar, welcome to PTI. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I'll start off with a very soft question, an easy question for you. You are one of the most recognized faces in the international arena, one of the most well-known foreign ministers. I think the nearest name that comes to mind is maybe Hillary Clinton or Lavrov. You have achieved this distinction in the last 5 years. What would you call your most satisfying achievement? Not the most significant, but the most satisfying achievement.
I think the most satisfying one was that moment when we actually closed out the G20 summit, the joint declaration, because there was an enormous, it was a very, very difficult process. Till that morning, a lot of people thought we wouldn't be able to actually get everybody to agree on it. So as a minister, I think I would say that certainly would be the one which for me would be professionally most satisfying. Though you didn't ask me what was the most significant, I think in the last, certainly my tenure as a minister and the period before that, one of course being associated with an enormous change in some very crucial relationships. The US, I would say UAE, Australia, these are to some extent even Japan. These relationships have really changed tremendously in the last 5 years, last decade, and the growth of the Quad. That again something which we had tried a decade and a half ago, not succeeded, did it a second time, and this time it's actually really worked very well.
Okay. And why was the G20 most satisfying? Because it was hard work. Is that why it was?
No, it wasn't just the hard work. I think in many ways the prestige of the country was riding on it. It was the biggest diplomatic responsibility we had taken up in our history. And the manner in which we conducted it was also very unique. And therefore it had a lot of public buy-in. I mean, I've been in this business for a long time. I haven't seen any foreign policy event with which the Indian public was so associated and vested in. And also because, think of it this way, this is, I would say, one of the most crucial platforms today in the world. We managed it at a very difficult time and made sure that it actually came out of a very stressful period much stronger. Imagine if it hadn't. So I think there was a lot riding on it, both for the country, obviously for the government in office, but I would say for the world as well.
Yeah. A lot was riding in it for the country. I mean, this leads me to my other question, is that you have been instrumental in raising the profile of the foreign ministry, the work that the foreign ministry does domestically. Generally speaking, Indians have not been so involved in what the foreign ministry does, but now there is a much more awareness, greater awareness of what you do. When you have been campaigning in the elections,
sure.
Do you see a sense of that recognition from the people that you meet, that you have raised the stature of India, you have raised the profile of India in the international world?
Well, I certainly see a much stronger interest in the country and foreign policy. In fact, I look at my own party manifesto, the space that the BJP manifesto has devoted to foreign policy is much more than it has done before. But I would say it reflects 2 or 3 things. One, it reflects the globalization of India, that actually there's a demand in the public, there's an interest in the public, they're much more connected to what is happening in the world. Variety of reasons, smartphones, better media, you could say more travel, more people working outside, more relatives and friends working. I think there's all of that. The second factor I would say is actually the Prime Minister, that the position which Prime Minister Modi has carved out on the international stage. I think country takes great pride in it. I see particularly, but not only, I see particularly young people very, very moved by it. They feel they are with you as that happens. So I think the kind of international presence that he has been, the ideas he has given, the responsibilities we have taken, the way we have projected and protected our national interest, I think that's the second reason. And the third, very honestly, we in the Foreign Ministry have made a conscious effort at actually communicating foreign policy to the people. That we actually, my message even in these elections is foreign policy matters to you. That if we, buying oil from Russia is a foreign policy decision, but the cost in the petrol pump is a public interest. Making sure that wheat prices remain stable, or the fertilizer budget doesn't skyrocket, or that actually Apple phones are made in India. All these in some way, or that we actually get oxygen during the Delta wave of the COVID. There is a foreign policy action here or a decision here, but at the end of the day, the Indian consumer, the Indian public actually feels the impact. And I think when you start communicating to the people, they respond to it.
So the people are coming to realize that it is a global village, the village is getting smaller. What happens in one part of the world affects lives here, in their neighborhood.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So you have obviously, you're like a great team, the PM and you. I wouldn't say individual, maybe the PMO and the Foreign Ministry. You have a great team in this?
I would say actually at one level, the Prime Minister and his cabinet. Why I say that is, the Foreign Ministry or the Foreign Minister, our diplomacy is not just us. There's an economic side to it, there's a military defense side to it, there's a technology side to it. So one of my own assessments, my perception is that Prime Minister Modi inculcates a very strong team spirit, that the ministries of the government are much less siloed. He encourages people to work together in a much more coordinated fashion. And if you look at a lot of what we do, let us say if you look at these rescue operations that we've done, they come together because there's the military, there's the defense ministry, there's the foreign ministry, there's the home, or if you look at COVID responses, there's health, there's us. So it's been very much a characteristic of his government, which is everybody work together to deliver more effect.
What sense did you get during your campaigning? You were in Telangana, Andhra.
Yeah, I've been in quite a few states.
Quite a few southern states. You were focused on southern states.
Also, no, I was in Odisha recent. I was in Rajasthan.
Okay. So you have covered a large part of the country.
Yes.
What's your sense of the reception for BJP? What are the chances of BJP at this point?
No, I think my sense from the ground is very positive. Our message to people is look at the last 10 years of the BJP in power. We are coming to seek your blessings on the basis of 10 years of delivery. So this is not just a promise or words that we are putting before you, which many of the other parties are doing. This is based on actually ground delivery. Okay. And I would say, to me, the biggest impact that I see, what I picked up, is actually the difference you can say in the public delivery. That people getting rations, people getting electricity, water, roads, houses, health access, and that a lot of this is happening not the way it used to be before. Very slow, very cumbersome, very corrupt. Today it's much more digitally delivered. People are much more aware of what their entitlements are. They get it much more, very much more smoothly. So there is actually a higher opinion among the people of the government. Still room to grow, no question. But a feeling that yes, Prime Minister Modi is kind of shaken up the system. He's actually applied technology. We're getting stuff. He's pushing the system to do things for the benefit of the people. I mean, that sense is very strong. The second is really that the country's prestige in the world is very high. You know, that I see as a very, even in smaller towns, you know, even I would say frankly almost in village level, I see that sentiment.
Mr. Sam Pitroda, he made these remarks which could be taken as racist remarks because, you know, you talked about the color of the skin and all that. Would you be willing to put this off as an immature comment on our people, or do you think there is a more sinister motive in his statement?
You know, look, he is not exactly a young person, so you can't say it is immature. Here is a person who's been around a long time. I think what he was saying probably is what is the talk in the circles which he inhabits, possibly shared by people he has mentored. And I think, you know, there were two parts of it which were troubling for me. One, what you referred to, this typecasting and racial stereotyping. I think that was troubling for me. The second was actually a sense that, you know, which the remark implies, that there are very different people, you know, and somehow somebody has put it together, it has taken some kind of effort to bring them all together to make India. I find that even more troubling, because that is actually the colonial way of trying to define India, that, you know, it took some outside force, it took some external force or some inorganic effort to put a country together. I think we have a natural organic unity. I mean, to me, India is a civilization. It is a you know, it's a belief system in a way. It is something which is in our soul. It is in our sort of spirit, and clearly he doesn't share it. And I think when I hear Rahul Gandhi, for example, talk about India as a negotiation, it's the same. You know, the Vichardhara is very similar. It is, you know, how can India be a negotiation? I mean, India is India. So, to me, this is a certain kind of thinking, a thinking which is actually assumes we are in bits and pieces, and somewhere, you know, in their view, some ruler, maybe some family, somebody has put something together. So I actually found that, I mean, not just the first part of it I found offensive. The second part of it actually I found very deeply troubling, because that is why, you know, when I look back, I see, you know, why did they let 370 go on for so long? You know, why are they so easy about really, why don't they protect national unity, integrity much more strongly? I think the answer is latent in that kind of attitude.
But does Sam Pitroda speak for the entire party?
No, look, it's not that. As I said, I think here is a person who expresses himself. You know, there's a saying that a slip of the tongue is a slip of the mind. So it's actually a mind speaking. It's a mindset. Now, who shares that mindset, who doesn't, you know. But I would only suggest a person who's been around that long. This is clearly the mindset of a party and mindset of a secretary.
Yeah, he has resigned as the head of the overseas.
Yes, so when you screw up in the middle of an election, I guess that's what you do.
But do you expect him to apologize? Do you expect the party to apologize?
No, look, I think the party has revealed its mindset.
Okay. You spoke earlier about the successes of the Modi government in its delivery in raising the stature of India. Now, don't you think that these successes, these achievements, should take the center stage of the campaigning by the BJP? Unfortunately, we have seen that there is a lot of there's a Hindu-Muslim narrative creeping into the campaigning in the BJP's campaign. Why isn't the party talking more about its achievements?
No, I don't think that's a fair characterization. I think the party is talking about its achievements. As I said, I myself have been on the ground. You watch what Prime Minister or Rajnath ji or Amit Bhai, all of them say. I think a lot of it is about what we have done, the transformation we have brought about in the last 10 years. But I think it's also a fact we are in competitive politics. In this election, 3 issues have come up. One issue which has come up is religious-based reservation. I mean, it is a latent issue. The Congress wants to have it, but not publicly say that they're doing it. So, what they often do, the ally will say it. Lalu Prasad Yadav said it. Congress will do some of it in Karnataka. They have a record in Andhra, as you know, of at least attempting. So, this whole issue of religious-based reservation is actually a line the Congress is pushing. Now, either the BJP ignores it or the BJP contests it. The second is actually this kind of radical redistribution politics, which to my mind reminds me, and I'm old enough to remember it, it reminds me of the 1960s and 70s and 80s. The kind of policies which brought us to the crisis in 1991-92. That when somebody says we are going to do a survey, we are going to, create, redistribute in the country. I mean, this is back to pre-Narasimha Rao reform era, and that kind of radical economic thinking, which is actually a cover for a kind of a permit Raj, license Raj, family Raj syndrome.
Right.
The third is actually the whole issue of national unity, integrity and terrorism and countering terrorism. Today, after 2008, if we are seeing 2611, being questioned, if we are seeing, here we have, and this is again very clever. Sometimes Congress would do it. Sometimes somebody else will do it, but Congress will not disown it. Sometimes it will not be in the manifesto, but so you will not put CAA in the manifesto, but Chidambaram ji will speak about it. You will not talk about 370 or you will not talk about POK, but Farooq Abdullah will speak about it. You will not do Muslim reservation, but Lalu Prasad will speak about it. So don't think it's a coincidence. So, there is a kind of a role distribution here. Sometimes one part, maybe that's why they need a sort of a gaggle of players. There's a degree of deniability and usability out here. Sure. But some things they have themselves said, like this kind of return to the discredited politics of the 60s and 70s, the discredited economics of 60s and 70s.
Yeah. Now, I started my career in the mid-80s, and since then I've been, a student of foreign policy. I've been watching it. The foreign policy has traditionally in India been a consensus-driven policy.
I don't know about that.
The opposition really always came together with the government when it came to foreign policy, when it came to India's efforts to win friends or which side India was taking. But that consensus, at least I feel that the consensus is breaking now. There isn't much of that consensus.
No, look, I think, yes, there was a period when you had opposition leaders who were big enough to extend their support to the government on an issue of national interest.
Yes.
So, for example, in the 1950s, after severely criticizing Pandit Nehru for his China policies, when the war came, the opposition stood with the government. We are seeing something very different now, which is when Galwan Ghati happened, when the Chinese forces came on the LAC and we are countering it, we actually saw sections of the opposition actually attack not just the government, they even attacked the army. I mean, you had somebody like Rahul Gandhi say, Yangtze mein hamari jawanon ki pitai hui, whereas actually our Jawans gave a very strong reply in Yangtze. So if you ask me, has the quality of the opposition gone down? I have to agree with you. Yes, that opposition is no longer nationally motivated. They are much more partisan. They are not able to rise to the occasion. Yes. But your basic question, which is, there was a consensus in foreign policy. Think about it. Let's take Pakistan. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee resigned because of the Nehru-Liaquat Ali Pact and the manner in which the Nehru government was conducting relations with Pakistan. B.R. Ambedkar, when he resigned, expressed deep concern about the manner in which the government had handled its relationship with the United States. On China, there was vocal criticism not only from the opposition, even from members of the cabinet about the manner in which Nehru conducted his China policy. Okay. Probably one of the most divisive issues was Israel, where starting with Maulana Azad's objection to establishing ambassadorial relations with Israel, you actually had to wait till 1992, till you had a non-Gandhi Nehru Prime Minister who established embassy. You have to wait till 2017, till Narendra Modi went as the first Prime Minister of India to Israel. So I would actually suggest to you that that picture of consensus is quite exaggerated. In fact, at various points of time, there were sharp divisions of opinion. But you had at that time a very dominant, in fact not one but two, Nehru and Indira Gandhi, very dominant prime ministers. And they were able to give that impression of much greater consensus than the reality actually justified.
But we have a very strong Prime Minister even now.
Yes.
But we don't have that picture of consensus.
Because I think the opposition at crucial moments has not stepped in the manner in which the opposition did. I mean, just think about it today. Yeah. Can you imagine on something like 26/11, a politician of that era, actually questioning it? Can you imagine Indian armed forces taking actions against Pakistan in Uri and Balakot, and they are questioning did the armed force really do it or not do it? So I think as I said, some of it is your consensus itself is a slightly flawed, more than a slightly flawed assumption. And secondly, I think you have an opposition which today cannot think in terms of the country.
Right. Now, we know that there is greater awareness among the lay people, common people in India about the foreign policy, but at the same time they are not, they're not adept at foreign policy, they don't know much about it. How would you say, for a layman, how would you explain to them how the NDA government's foreign policy has been different from the UPA government's vis-a-vis China, United States, the Gulf, Middle East?
It's interesting because actually I do a lot of this. In fact, even on the campaign trail, it's quite interesting. I have gone in, I was say in Orissa, I have gone in talking about what are all the big economic changes, social changes, infrastructure changes. But a large part of the questions I've got are exactly the kind of questions you're asking me. So I tell them, number one, that there is a much clearer sense of Bharat first. That when we look at an issue, we look at it from the point of view of where is Indian national interest. And that, if that Indian national interest means taking pressure or fending off other countries or pushing back, we're prepared to do it. I would say that is a departure. We are, for example, very, very focused on trying to get UN Security Council membership. This was not the case earlier. In fact, there was a time when the position of our government is first let them accommodate China and then our turn will come. So we are very clear, Bharat comes first. Number two, very strong focus on national security. Not only positioning wise, but in terms of friends and partners who will contribute to our national security. So and also in terms of the border infrastructure, where there's been quite a remarkable transformation. The quality of the infrastructure today allows us to deploy troops on the China LAC in a manner in which we could not have done earlier. Number three, much more focused on, I would say, getting for the country the resources, the best practices, the technologies, which we believe are important for national development. Number 4, much more willing to do things for Indians outside and people of Indian origin outside. The earlier positions, 50s, 60s, were you left the shores, you are on your own. Today we proudly and openly say that when you leave India, we are always there for you and with you, and we have demonstrated that in many ways. We are also much more conscious of our culture, civilization, heritage, traditions than previous governments. We project it much more confidently. A very obvious example is the International Day of Yoga. So here is a tradition today, enjoys universal respect, but it took an NDA BJP government under Narendra Modi to do it.
Right.
So these were all be the big differences.
And we are I think the only country with such a large diaspora in the world.
Yes, we would be. I would say we would be we would be the country with the largest diaspora.
China is next.
China, but when I look at our number of citizens abroad, I think we have more.
Yeah, and we are also spread out geographically much more than the Chinese are, who seem to be concentrated in the United States and Australia.
Southeast Asia.
Southeast Asia, of course. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Sir, I'll ask about geopolitics and our foreign policy priorities. So what is your assessment about the geopolitical turmoil that we have been witnessing in the last few years? And how do you navigate these challenges to just push our foreign policy priorities and to just, the aim of raising India's global stature? Where do you see India in the next 10 years?
Well, that's a lot of questions at one go. But I think the common point for all of them is that the world global order is actually in transition. Transition not in the sense of incremental change, 5%, 10%. We are actually talking of a very deep churn. And the kind of world we are going to see by the end of this decade will be fundamentally different from the kind of world we are seeing today. How? One, we are seeing very different new players with greater weight, you can say. If you look at who are the top 20, 30 countries, that list is changing and the ranking in that list is changing. Right. And we ourselves are part of that change. 10 years ago we were number 11 economically, today we are number 5. The expectation is next 2 to 3 years will be number 3. So, and we will keep, obviously growing till a point will be 2 and hopefully beyond. The second is the dominance of the United States, which started after the end of the Cold War. I think today has effectively come to the end. The United States is still the premier power of the world, but for a variety of reasons. One, you can say the next lot of powers are much closer to the United States than it used to be. Also, the US itself has changed its posture vis-a-vis the world. It's willing to it's more careful about responsibilities it takes on. So what it has done is many regional issues, for example, are for regional powers to sort out. You're not going to get one country. At that time, the Secretary of State, then Madeleine Albright, described it as the indispensable power, that in every issue, where is the US? I think many issues today are being dealt with much more locally, regionally than they used to be. I think the international economy is changing because last 25 years we had this globalization process. And that model of globalization, it did two things. One, it concentrated manufacturing and technology in one geography. And number two, it hollowed out the capacities in many countries, including ours. And there is a reaction to both. At a strategic level, countries feel, why should I, why am I dependent, or why because that kind of over concentration in fact is leveraged. So I should actually today spread my risk. I should hedge. I should have more centers of production. I should have more supply chains. So one part of it is a move to actually diversify the global economy. The second is because of the hollowing out of the economy, of many economies. There's a desire today to protect their jobs, that they are seeing the social consequences of this kind of very, I would say, flawed model of globalization. So this is to, also become a very big driver. And then there are the new technologies, the AI and the chips and the drones and the space and the electric vehicles and the battery and the green and clean technologies, which will have a tremendous impact on all of us. I mean, few years from now, you and I will not be doing an interview like this. I mean, somewhere AI will also be in the room. Think about it. So what would happen? I think the combination of all of this today poses a kind of a picture of great churn. And on top of it, competition is sharpening. I mean, just think about it today. You have a conflict in Ukraine. You have fighting in Gaza. You have these attacks in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea. You have tensions in the South China Sea. You have terrorism in different geographies. You have, the kind of problem that we are having on the LAC with China, but other countries also have their own issues with China. So the, multiple conflicts, tensions, divides, with all these variables that I'm putting to you, I'm painting to you actually a very, very stormy international scene for the balance of the decade. And which is why I think today one of the biggest choices which the Indian voter has to make is, in this situation, who do you trust to lead the Indian government?
Dr. Jaishankar, one of the highlights of India's foreign policy engagement in the last 10 years has been the upward trajectory in India-US relations. However, there is a view that, in fact, the allegations by the US on the murder for hire case, it has somehow impacted the trajectory of India-US relations. So if that is so, then how do you plan to bring it back to the track?
I think that is not so.
You don't think India-US relations have been impacted?
But I don't think the fundamental course of the upward trajectory of India and the United States is impacted by this at all. I think today we have such a strong strategic convergence with the United States, including many of the issues that I spelled out, that if you look at it in terms of contributing to the global commons, of maintaining peace, stability, security, driving the international economy, diversifying production, creating new supply chains, actually moving on new technologies. Because remember, on technologies, India actually has immense capability to contribute through its human talent. So I think the India-US is a very, very solid account. Its trajectory, I mean, it had a problem. Let me also be very honest. A lot of the problem, because we spoke about the consensus in the foreign policy, there was a kind of left-wing ideology in this country, which said, let us not do too much with the United States. Okay, this goes back to the Nehruvian, Krishna Menon type period. I think it went all the way till 2014. Maybe Atalji's Sarkar was an exception, but otherwise, pretty much there were self-imposed constraints on our dealing with the United States. After 2014, Mr. Modi doesn't share those. And we've seen actually a much more robust, a much more, wholehearted relationship with the US, which is actually showing results on the ground.
Dr. Jaishankar, another irritant has been Canada actually. I mean, Canada has been giving space to anti-India elements for quite some time. We have been asking them to just take actions, but there have been no actions so far. Last week, we saw a parade in Ontario that featured our PM in a very offensive manner. So how do you deal with Canada actually, the problem emanating from Canada?
Are we running out of options there? What are the options that we have left there?
No, it's not so much a question of running out of options. Look, what we have seen, to our regret, has been the direction of Canadian politics, where separatist, extremist forces, many of whom openly advocate violence, have been given political space in that country. And there are people in positions of prominence today in Canadian politics who actually espouse that kind of separatism and extremism. So it's I think a problem from which we have to face up to. We cannot, for the sake of good relations, overlook that. Now, whenever we have taken it up with the Canadians, and it's not a new issue, it's been going on almost for 10 years now, they keep saying, oh, we have freedom of speech. Now, we also have freedom of speech in our country, but freedom of speech does not mean freedom to threaten foreign diplomats. Freedom of speech does not mean the kind of positions, and the kind of activities which people in Canada are doing, which does harm to our country because of its support for separatism. And freedom of speech doesn't mean, this kind of space which is also given to people, of very dubious background, people associated with organized crime and so on. I mean, in any rule-based society, you would imagine that, you would check people's background, how they came, what passports they carried, etc. If you have people whose presence there was itself on very dubious documents, I mean, what does it say about you? It actually says that your vote bank actually is more powerful than your rule of law.
I'm going to move to West Asia. The situation there is pretty tense there. And it would have definitely put back our India, Middle East, Europe corridor initiative. How many years has it been set back, and how do we bring it back?
Well, yes, it has been definitely a source of concern for us, and the kind of expectation we had when that agreement was signed in September, we've had to adjust it a bit. But on the other hand, all the parties to the agreement have reconfirmed that we think it's a great idea, we're all committed to it. So we'll have to wait for things to stabilize a bit. But I agree with you. I think it is a matter of great concern, and we have to see. And it's also a very complex issue because it's not a single issue on which you have a black and white judgment. I think you have a range of concerns out there, from terrorism to hostages to a humanitarian corridor to a two-state solution. So how do you get the balance right, and more important, how do you make it actually work on the ground?
And on the same issue, I mean, there have been lots of protests in the United States and campuses against Israel. There seems to be, or there's a perception that anti-Semitism is growing in the United States. Would you want to comment on that, or it's a completely domestic issue that you don't want to get involved in?
No, unlike a lot of people, or unlike some people in some other countries, I comment if I feel there's a legitimate Indian interest involved.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I have not taken it upon myself to judge everybody else on their internal politics, and I hope others follow my good example in this.
Right. Let's move to China.
Sure.
The Prime Minister gave an interview recently, and in the backdrop of that interview, when can we expect a forward movement on the situation in Eastern Ladakh?
Look, I think we would hope that there's a resolution of the remaining issues out there. These issues mainly pertain to patrolling rights and patrolling abilities out there. I would not link it with the Prime Minister's interview per se. I think Prime Minister was giving a big picture viewpoint, and his big picture viewpoint was a very reasonable viewpoint, which is, after all, as neighbors, every country wants good relations with its neighbors. But today our relations with China are not normal because peace and tranquility in the border areas has been disturbed. So he was expressing the hope that the Chinese side should realize that the present situation is not in its own interest. It's something I have said also repeatedly and publicly, and we continue to this diplomacy is patient work, so we continue to discuss it with the Chinese side. And I would say that we need to resolve those issues if the relationship is to come back to normal.
Right. So, what kind of relationship do we want with China? I mean, is there some lack of clarity maybe on what the relationship should be? Because we have said very clearly that unless there is normality at the border, the relations will not become normal. But at the same time, the trade appears to be normal. It's growing with China. So how do we reconcile trade, diplomacy, and our overall relations?
So, you see, what has happened is I think it's common sense that if the border, there's no peace and tranquility in the border, how can you have a normal relationship? After all, if somebody is at your front door in an unfriendly manner, I mean, you're not going to go out there and act as though everything is normal. So that's to me a straightforward proposition. When you talk about trade, I think what has happened is, in many ways, the fact that we actually neglected manufacturing in this country, that in many ways we didn't give the kind of support to our manufacturers, especially our small and medium enterprises. In fact, when Make in India started, you had people who even laughed at it. I mean, even now there are people like Rahul Gandhi who believe that we are incapable of manufacturing in this country. And there are some economists who also have that kind of view. So the fact that our manufacturing fell behind, I think, has created many of the problems that today we are experiencing. The way to do, you cannot get an immediate fix, but what you can do, which we have been trying to do, is actually to boost manufacturing. How are we trying to do it? One, by rapidly modernizing infrastructure, making it as efficient as possible, because without efficient infrastructure, you're not going to get competitive manufacturing. Number two, making it easier to do business. That, 10 years ago, how environment was used as an argument actually to make business very difficult in this country. We have also been very much more supportive of our own enterprises when there is dumping of goods, unlike in the past where actually they were left to the mercy of a subsidized producer outside the country. So these are all ways by which we think, and then we have this production-linked incentive scheme in different sectors. We give incentives to produce more in this country. We also think if we attract more foreign investment and more foreign technology, so areas like semiconductors, etc., we will be able to, for example, make chips ourselves. Whereas, till now we are importing chips. If there's a shortage of chips somewhere else or somebody doesn't supply, our auto industry suffers. So I think this is hard work. We are at it. We have made some progress. I think we need clearly at least another term to make up a lot for the lost ground of the previous years.
China's influence in South Asia has been growing. I mean, even Bangladesh, our next door neighbor, depends, almost 70% of its defense equipment comes from China.
Yeah, but that's not new.
That's not new.
That's actually going on for 40, 50 years.
Yeah. So there's that. There is also Maldives, which has completely gone into the Chinese sphere. You had the Maldivian foreign minister in Delhi today. You met him today. What were the discussions on?
No, look, I don't. First of all, I don't agree that any country has gone into any other country's sphere in the kind of sweeping way in which you said, because that's not the reality of how politics actually works. I mean, today, for example, I had a discussion with my counterpart from Maldives, and the takeaway from that discussion is we have the reality of being two neighbors next door to each other, and we have to get along with each other. It's in our mutual interest to do so. But when you speak about a Chinese presence in our neighborhood, depending on which point of history you want to pick, I can show you some Chinese presence. But let me give you some of the milestones. We take Sri Lanka. What was the turning point? The Hambantota port. Which year? 2008. Maldives. What was the turning point? When one of our companies was removed from the airport project. Which year? I think 2011. Okay. If you look
Nepal,
at
Nepal?
No, look at Nepal. I mean, a lot of it actually goes back even to the times of the monarchy. So even Bangladesh, I mean, under Ziaur Rahman and Irshad, and in fact during the BNP government, you actually had as you yourself said, in fact, if you look at our neighbors, many of them have a long history of getting weapons from China. Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, to cite two examples, they didn't start buying anything last 10 years. They've been buying for many decades. So we need to be, I think, A, accurate, and B, we need to be confident. Look, I am clear that international politics, international relations is competitive. I have a neighbor like China. I have to learn to compete. By my complaining, China is not going to stop doing things. And if I do not build up my strength at home, our foreign policy will be as good as our domestic policy. It's a function of our domestic policy. That if I can actually build up my economy, if I can actually build up my manufacturing, if I can create the kind of capabilities which today I'm trying to do, I think you're going to find that foreign policy has much more resources and much more tools in its toolkit to actually influence the world.
You seem to be on top of everything. Is there anything that keeps Dr. Jaishankar awake at night?
Other than coffee? No, look, I actually, I'm clearly very immersed in what I do. And mostly I kind of spend, my days are very full, and because it's also, I deal with the world, so days are very long. Some part of the world is awake when you're going to sleep. So by and large, I can say I have a good night's sleep. After all, we have a great Prime Minister, we have a good government, we are going into elections, we think our prospects are very good. And I think most of all, honestly, I say this, I'm much more optimistic for our country than I have been all my life. When I look, and part of it is because I also see the abilities and the talent of younger people, what they can do, the kind of achievements, something like what you saw during Chandrayaan or this kind of thing. It really tells you, we have so much in us. We need to bring that out.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
Jaishankar. It was a pleasure.